Greetings and salutations. You are listening to the Into the North podcast, where we take a look at the competitive side of the Commander format, also known as CDH. I am one of your hosts, Lyndon, aka Noobzors, and today I am joined by my co-hosts, Reed, aka Sick Robot.
What is up?
Morgan, aka Spleenface.
How's it going?
And Matt couldn't be with us this week, so instead we are joined by an extra special guest and friend of the show, Scotty from the Notion Thieves.
Hey, howdy, hey.
Yeah, and in this episode we're going to be covering a doozy, and that is how WotC designing specifically for Commander is negatively impacting the format. And that's not just for CDH, although we are, of course, going to be talking about CDH, as that's what we do. We're also going to be talking about how it impacts EDH and how these kinds of designs are negatively impacting the format as a whole. But before we get into that, what have you guys been up to since the last episode? Anyone want to take things away? I can start.
Well, geez, since your last episode, gosh, it's been such a busy time for me. But I think your listeners probably don't want to hear about that. Huh?
Just say what you've been up to, Scotty. What have you been up to recently?
Oh, okay. What have I been up to recently? Well, I've been streaming with new streaming group, the Notion Thieves. We're slowly revealing the cast members and having a grand old time with our soft launch, getting ready to kick it into overdrive here very soon. And I have been doing some guest appearances on different things, I guess. And right now I'm getting all my stuff ready for Magic Fest Toronto in May, finalizing my deck lists and that kind of thing.
Hell yeah. We'll be talking about that more in housekeeping.
Exciting.
But before we get to that, Reed, Morgan, anything for you guys?
Just, been demonstrating the disgustingness that is Hulk right now.
I've been trying to have
games.
fun and then playing against Reed a bunch. So.
Yeah. That's accurate.
Myself, I've maintained my stance that I've been trying to ever since Thassa's Oracle was spoiled. I was like, that's it. I'm drawing the line. I don't want to play against Flash or play with Flash. So I've maintained my record so far. Haven't played against Flash, haven't played with Flash. So that's going strong. Don't know how long this is going to last, but I'm enjoying my time in the hopefully what the future format's going to look like without Flash. So
just to confirm, you are just burying your head in the sand instead of...
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. We actually no, sorry. It wasn't as soon as Thassa's Oracle was spoiled. It was, we did a team turn 3 stream where everyone was playing Thoracle decks.
Oh yeah, that one.
The one.
Oh yeah, that one that I intentionally abstained from.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So you're you can't shame me for this kind of decision.
No,
Scotty.
I left the state to make sure I didn't have to be involved in that one.
Yeah. No, it's that after playing in that, and we had something like 5 games in a 2-hour stream.
Yep.
Yeah, I was like, that's enough. I've done it. I've experienced it. Yeah,
that's fair.
Okay, well, that about wraps it up for that. So let's get into housekeeping. And of course, our housekeeping segment is, well, for the most part, it's usually about new patrons. And we do have a new patron. So big shout out to Tyler G.
Tyler G.
Okay, guys, we're going to do it. Yeah.
Are you?
Tyler G. You rock. Again,
wow.
Command Zone, cease and desist. That's the only way we'll stop.
That's...
Yes,
that's the proprietary. Thank you.
Well, guys, are we doing it?
Just Command Zone. It's just one tiny piece of paper, but until then, might as well keep appropriating others' intellectual property.
We can't help ourselves. We can only be stopped by the law.
Welcome to Into the North.
I take
Welcome
no
to
part
Into the
in
North.
this.
Anyway,
only one may stand.
I'd like to legally distance myself from the usage.
Okay, well, goofs aside, Magic Fest Toronto. Now is the time we're going to start every episode up until the event. We're going to be shilling it. So we're expecting, I think, the Spike Feeders. I'm not sure if all of them are making it, but it sounds like a whole bunch of them are.
Everybody but Jerry.
Everybody but Jerry.
Jerry has to work.
Shaper is coming. I think Wedge is coming.
Wedge is 100% coming. Yeah, it's gonna be great.
Yeah, Wedge is in.
Playing with Power. God, I need to pull up the list.
Sounds like some subset of the Laboratory Maniacs are trying to make
the
it out.
Timmy T1000.
The Timmy T1000.
That's the one.
Cobblepot is coming, I
Our
believe.
long-suffering podcast editor Roadkill.
That's the
is
one.
Oh my
coming.
gosh.
Oh, dude, that's the biggest.
making it
That's
out.
the biggest star. Yeah,
That's the big one.
That's the big one.
I think Ian from the CDH cast might be coming. Nathan, who, if you troll any of like the our Discord or Spike Feeders Discord or lots of just the EDH Discords, Nathan, renowned chef,
Chef Nathan.
CDH chef, is going to be there, and he's going to be
top 3 finalist in the Throne of Eldraine food competition.
Bake Off?
Oh,
Yeah.
true.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the Throne of Eldraine Bake Off, yeah.
Yeah, he's going to be organizing some dinners and stuff. So definitely, this event is shaping up to be better than Vegas.
Oh yeah.
So
The place
at
I'm
his
staying in Toronto is 20 steps away from Nathan's restaurant. So
And it's an excellent restaurant.
pretty hyped
I can
about it.
certainly confirm that.
yeah, so if you
Really?
guys are sorry, Morgan, what would you say?
I just said it's an excellent restaurant. I can
Okay.
certainly confirm that.
Yep.
The man knows his food.
I can attest.
Yeah, so if you were at all on the fence about going to GP Toronto, definitely encourage you to come. Going to be super sweet. Lots of CDH peeps going to be there. Lots of time to hang out. Great food, great games. It's going to be awesome.
All that good stuff.
And,
Can't wait.
and stay tuned for further event details and things like that, because there might be more on the horizon.
Oh, buy your Command Zone pass now because they sell out like fast as the event
Oh, yeah.
approaches.
Yeah, buy your Command Zone pass and book accommodation before it gets expensive.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to new developments. Morgan, you want to cover this one?
Yeah, sure. So we had a new episode of the Untitled MTG podcast by the professor from Tolarian Community College, featuring one of the members of Playing with Power and talking a little bit about CEDH and just getting the word out, explaining what we're about. And it was definitely very interesting, and it was a good sort of introductory level covering of the format for people who maybe don't know as much what we're about, and they covered sort of some interesting topics of discussion that we see brought up a lot sort of within the community. And it's just great to have some more representation on larger platforms for our community.
Yeah, for sure. And this was following up Shivam's episode on Tolarian Community College, right?
Yes.
Yeah, the one.
Yeah, but
Oh.
how much can we trust Ryan? He plays Godot,
So,
but like
yeah,
not
with
ironically.
with my life, I could trust.
And for the rest of us, with literally nothing but the very tip
Nothing.
of my pinky finger.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's mostly contempt.
yeah. The Shivam episode, I know, got a bit of response from the community. That's,
Got a bit of a response.
Yeah, there was some heat.
don't bother Shivam. He's a nice guy.
He really is.
Really, stop adding the guy.
Yeah, he's the one of the only people from the CAG who's in our corner. So
He has enough to deal with already.
yeah, stop annoying him
Don't
and
pile more on.
don't scare him away, please.
and yeah, he's just on the subject of that episode. He's genuinely extremely supportive of us. So,
Yeah.
the way he sort of phrased it, it came across, he said some stuff, and he said after the fact that listening back, he didn't really communicate what he was trying to say effectively, and he wound up misrepresenting our community a little bit, and he apologized for that. So be nice. He's a good
Also,
guy.
remember, he's on the CAG, which is the advisory group, which means
Yes.
he doesn't get a vote. He just gets to say what he thinks is right.
If he had a vote, Flash would be banned right now. Remember that.
Right, exactly. Shivam is our Lord and Savior, and if he could vote, everything would be better right now.
I agree. Agreed. Okay, so now to get into the main topic of the show, and our clickbait, headline for this is WotC ruining Commander? Yeah.
And if we acknowledge that we're clickbaiting, then that means it's okay, right?
Oh yeah.
Well, I don't think it's clickbait anymore at that point.
Yeah.
Right? Because we've fulfilled the obligation.
We need to put in parentheses after the episode name, not clickbait.
Not clickbait.
There you go.
You won't believe number 3.
Yeah.
Should it be followed by a series of X's and D's?
Why not? Have a big
Yeah,
red arrow in the thumbnail too.
Only in lowercase though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll definitely have to pick the right card art for the thumbnail on this one.
Don't put that pressure on me. I'm not ready for that.
Just to get
prejudice.
the extra clicks,
It's invoke prejudice.
Okay,
no, it's not.
Let me get into the actual topic here, guys. So recent discussion in the casual EDH community has reignited an old subject's interest regarding WotC's, uninspired design for the cards they make for Commander. So some examples of this that get brought up a lot are Tulane and Corvold, just rewarding you for doing, things you were going to do anyway, very basic stuff with just drawing a card.
I just need to preface this segment with "Leave my dragon dad alone," and that's the last thing I'll say about it.
You know what? I'm gonna be shitting on Gitrog a bit. So you know what?
Okay.
You're gonna have to suck it up for this one.
All right. Okay.
But yeah, so we're going to be talking about how these designs are really impacting CDH as well as EDH more generally, because of course, what impacts the casual side also impacts CDH. Although in this case, we kind of have to pull apart what is impacting casual versus competitive and how they're interacting, because a lot of the designs that are harmful for casual, as we'll get into, are actually not so bad for competitive.
Well, they're just not good enough.
Well, the thing is, you can look at, okay, well, I'll save it after my little spiel here. So we're mainly going to be discussing cards from 2019. We're going to touch on some stuff from older sets, and mention them every now and then, but we're mostly going to be focusing on 2019 as an exemplar for how things have been going and the trend that's been building up over the past couple of years. So, keep that in mind if you're wondering, why haven't they mentioned, Thrasios and Tymna? I mean, we're going to mention Thrasios and Tymna, probably. But we're not going to mention every single commander printed in, the last 5 years that fits the criteria we're discussing.
All 300.
Yeah, exactly.
So many.
One thing I do want to say before we move on a little bit is it was sort of put as, WotC ruining the format and uninspired design. Certainly, this isn't all of their design is uninspired, and that's not what we're trying to imply. We're just pulling out there's a decent number of cards that they've made that we think are sort of examples of this trend, even though they are doing other cool stuff and opening some doors as well.
Yeah. And
go ahead, sir.
Oh no, and I just did want to tack on I do think that WotC's good designs, I think, are overall getting better as they gain more and more years, and I think
Sure.
the best of their designs are better than they were 5 years ago. But we're more talking about sort of some of the more average and less great designs, I think.
Yeah, and just one last thing before we get into the real discussion is that, sorry if we talk a bit more about casual and stuff in this episode compared to CDH than we normally would, but that's sort of the nature of the design sort of aspects that we're going to be talking about. If we're talking about just competitive design for commanders, it's a bit myopic in my opinion, because the casual crowd and them kind of growing as players and maintaining a healthy casual base is really what allows our format to even exist. So we will be covering the full sort of perspective here. Okay, so now getting into the real kind of discussion regarding actual card designs and what we think of them. I think a good point to start, because we already mentioned it a bit, is Gitrog, Corvold, and Chulane, or Hullen, if Morgan's going to make me say it correctly.
The correct pronunciation is Hulani.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. I'll keep saying Chulane, okay? But yeah, so
John Chulane.
Cards that are your commanders that are just in good colors and reward you for doing very basic things. So there's some examples of commanders, they'll allow you to draw cards. So SRAM, for instance. When you're casting an aura equipment, you're going to draw a card. SRAM also draws off vehicles, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
he does?
Aura's equipment and vehicles, right?
Does he? Wait.
Maybe?
Oh, boy.
Does he?
Yes, he does draw for vehicles.
Yeah.
okay, there we
Aura's
go.
equipment and vehicles.
But yeah, so SRAM is an example where he's rewarding you for doing a very specific thing and drawing cards. I do think it's a bit boring, but it's not egregious in the same sort of way that Gitrog, Corvold, and Chulane are, as well as other commanders, where you're getting rewarded for doing something that's very easy to build into your deck, and you get insane payoff. And with almost no deck building constraint, right? So, I'm running a 3-color deck, so I want to run fetches to fix my mana base. Well, guess what? All your fetches now draw you cards. Wow.
I think the most obvious comparison for SRAM, where SRAM looks reasonable and the thing you compare him to just looks really stupid, is Joyra Weatherlight Captain.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, draw for aura, equipment, or vehicles in mono white versus a draw for literally any artifact.
Yeah.
Is it?
Or legendary.
Or legendary creature. Yeah.
Yeah, it's this kind of thing. And so one thing that I think is why I would call this kind of uninspired is that these kind of mechanics where you're drawing from sacrificing effects, lands going to graveyards, or just, casting creatures, you can create advantage or have this be beneficial to you in some way that's other than just drawing a card, right? And that really opens up the space for interesting deck and design instead of just being pile of good cards plus, whatever has these really high synergies with my deck and that changes the card evaluation.
Well, so also, I think just to clarify, I think the issue that we have with these cards, it's not just that they're generic value engines, but it's more for the most part, the commander doesn't necessarily have a lot of bearing on how you build the deck in these cases when they're generic value commanders, especially for more casual decks where you're sort of just putting a bunch of good cards in the deck and they end up looking very homogenous.
Well, it's not even just that, because some of them, obviously in Corvold and Gitrog, you have to be, okay, lands and sacrificing. You have to, you're going to put the fetches in anyway.
Yeah,
but
there's quite an amount of build around in those decks too, as well.
There is some build around, right? Where, I was going to give an example of something like Dockside Extortions. You'd run Dockside anyway.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But there's cards that, maybe a Sylvan Safekeeper, for instance.
Sure.
Something that's a good card, but you wouldn't necessarily slam it in every, 2 or 3 color deck. But because the commander's effect changes the card evaluation so that it becomes worth running. So it's not just generic good cards, but the card evaluation and the synergies that you're building in are not difficult to see, and they're pretty boring. Yeah.
I think Corvold was probably less it certainly still has this problem to a degree, but it's generic enough in what you have to do to actually enable it that there are a few different ways people have taken it. I've seen lots of creature token type stuff. I've seen treasures. I've seen lands, as various different ways.
Sure.
But if you look at something like I think Hullen is probably the worst example of this, where it's just wow, I'm going to be playing a whole bunch of really cheap creatures and the self bouncers and some stuff that makes mana, and that's a deck, right? There's that deck, you have a few options of like, oh, do I want to try and include food chain or whatever? But there's not, if you look at the cards that make that commander good, they're the same across every potential way you could possibly build the deck.
Sure. Yeah.
Like the highest synergy card in the deck is Llanowar Elves.
Yeah. One of the annoying things about the design too is that it's not, they didn't just leave it with your commander gets this, value for doing something pretty boring, but also it's just self-enabling, right? Yeah. Gitrog sacrifices a land at the beginning of every upkeep. It's like, is that supposed to just check it in terms of, stopping your lands? I guess, but it's also drawing you cards, and same with Corvold. Oh, you have to sacrifice a land when it enters, or you have to sacrifice a permanent when it enters or attacks. It's like, it's drawing you cards when it enters or attacks, and it's enabling its own ability. Like,
right.
It's a drawback without real drawback.
Someone decided that they thought it would be a drawback, and I don't think they were looking far forward enough to realize what would happen.
Yeah.
People are just going to abuse that every time.
Yeah. So, we can start this conversation. So, I mean, we started this conversation off talking about those kind of things, and those are really more impactful for casual in terms of homogenizing the format and, attracting lots of players to these generically good, uninteresting commanders. But there's a point that's, I mentioned briefly in the kind of intro to this topic, which is how things that are bad for regular and casual EDH aren't necessarily bad for competitive. Gitrog, that's a competitive commander. Corvold and Chulainn are definitely, more off meta, more fringe commanders, but they're still, competitively viable.
And they do relatively unique things as well in the context of competitive,
yeah, exactly.
Right? So yeah, there's definitely like this duality between like what's bad for a casual environment versus what's good for a competitive environment.
Well, would you say that it's bad for a casual environment because it's homogenizing the play experience, but it's good for a competitive environment for like almost exactly the same reason?
Yeah, well, it's non-homogenizing in the competitive sense, I think, because it's so good. Like, it's bad in casual because it's so good and generically useful that people are drawn to it, right? It doesn't take a lot of deck building effort to design a good Chulainn deck, and you can do almost anything you want. It's like, wow, I want to run just birds tribal. Guess what?
Sure.
Your birds tribal deck is going to work because every time you cast a bird, it's drawing a card.
You draw a card. Yeah.
So in that sense, it's kind of boring and homogenizing for casual, but in competitive, it's good enough that it enables alternative strategies.
Right.
Yeah.
It's good enough. I think like you can play a 3-color general like Hullin or Corvold and not feel like you're at an extreme disadvantage compared to playing general value engine kings and queen Gracias Timna, right?
Yeah, and especially because like the decks that the complaint in casual is that the deck kind of just builds itself, but for a deck that builds itself, that means it's actually different than the top end of CEDH, which is where you're playing really good commanders and then you just kind of jam whatever good cards you want. Right. Like you're designing your deck to do, you just sort of put those cards in the deck because it's all commander agnostic.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So that's one of the issues between competitive and casual, and how there's that bit of dichotomy. But there is also some commanders that have been printed recently that we think are bad or lazy design that are not especially healthy for competitive or casual.
Right.
And that's really going to be the pushed or WotC's trend to push 5-color commanders more.
And it's really
now. We look back at some of the old 5-color commanders. What used to be the best 5-color commander in CDH for a long time? Anyone want to?
Scion of the Ur-Dragon?
Bingo.
General
exactly.
Tazri or Scion of the Ur-Dragon.
Yeah. Now, Scion used to be the... Tazri was obviously the specific food chain deck, right? Because it functioned uniquely as an outlet. Now, Scion, some competitive builds used his ability to some extent, but a lot of times it was just a 5-color Scion Hermit Druid deck.
Right.
And they were just using Scion for colors because he was the least bad option on that front. Now, the problem has come when they've started to make 5-color commanders with relevant effects. And the worst offender, and now this isn't a commander from this year, but this is just the prototypical example that I like to use, and that's Nagila. Nagila.
I'm gonna stop listening now.
Yeah. Yeah, all you Nagila fans out there, just plug your ears. But the fact that it's 5 colors, it's 5 colors on an ability, so it's not inhibited by its casting cost is not inhibited by its, the colors it provides is just such a step in the wrong direction, in my opinion. Especially in EDH generally. So I know there's like the 5-color problem that I brought up in the past on the podcast. We've discussed it where, there's no real punishment because the mana in EDH is so good. There's no real punishment for
also,
going to 5-color. So
other reasoning behind that is because like there's this issue where the mana punishment in casual doesn't really exist because it's sort of frowned upon to attack people's mana bases. Yeah, to play Blood Moon, to play MLD, so it's really hard to deal with consistent mana bases on a casual end of the spectrum, and also like doing like wastelandy, like legacy delver type strategy stuff and that kind of thing, where like you're just like wastelanding people out of the game and keeping everybody in the early game isn't necessarily fun, so you wouldn't be doing that anyway. But also like it's just not widely accepted to be doing that, and also the fact that it's not super strong on the competitive end of things either. And it's hard to do like targeted mana base disruption means that, just paired with the good dual lands and fetch lands and all that stuff, the lack of punishment also makes it a lot better.
Yeah.
Yeah. So even if it was 5-color commanding casting cost, right, or you got away with something like that, there is some effort that needs to go into casting it. But when it's only 2 generic and a red, to cast your amazing commander,
you know what?
That's a real problem.
I think the worst thing about it.
I was just gonna say, counter Lucky Stars that it's not 2 and a green instead.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, I think the worst thing about like Nagila specifically is that her ability is 5-color and also makes up for it, like breaks parity on the life loss from using pain lands and 5-color lands that have a penalty.
Yeah.
By giving the creatures that it makes lifelink. So you just kind of you can ignore that penalty basically. Nagila is particularly strong in that regard, I think.
Like I just don't see why Nagila couldn't have been fewer colors.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
When you need to, I think WotC is not. There's some trade-off that needs to happen when you're printing 5-color commanders, and when you think 5 colors, like and we'll be discussing Kenrith as well, because I think we all think that's a particularly uninspired design as well, where you're just stapling a bunch of effects that have according to their color identity to the card, and 5 colors, call it a day.
Yeah.
That's one thing, but if you're just upgrading the power level of something that's let's say Gitrog, that's a generic Golgari effect, but what if it was also 5-color and had a random 5-color ability that just didn't matter at all? Like it's adding power level to the card unnecessarily. Okay, so Reed, I know you had some points you want to make about Nagila.
Yeah. So I do think that Nagila. So just first of all, quickly, I do think Nagila is like less of an issue specifically in like competitive than some stuff that we're going to cover later on about Golos and Kenrith, because she doesn't it's not like she rewards you with cards for doing things. You're sort of locked into doing something very like pretty specific. And like it doesn't keep up with card advantage or any of that stuff. It sort of makes you want to do something specific for competitive. So I think she's a bit more unique on that front. That being said, we should also talk about some of these commanders in the context of casual, because we are sort of looking at comparing the card designs for competitive and casual. And I think Nagila is a really not great design for a casual format, right? Because
very poor.
This issue with this commander that's just an army in a can, and you just get to, by default, just by attacking, make very large boards and then just instantly kill people without having to do any work outside of the command zone, right? And I think I think Shivam had a really great tweet on this. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to find it at any point, but like basically just saying like, wow, like I've tried to build Najila multiple times and it just always ends up being like this unfun. I'm just going to attack and eventually have a large enough board to kill the table. And it doesn't matter if I'm trying to do like tribal warriors or tokens or whatever. It just ends up doing the same thing.
Right. And the low cost of casting to start out with in a casual pod makes it so that board wipes aren't particularly effective in controlling it unless everybody's playing multiple board wipes. Like the casting cost starting at 3 is just ridiculous. It's easy to get started. It's easy to get, even in casual, easy to get on the board as early as turn 2. And then
I found the tweet, which was, I gotta say, the more I look into it, the less I want to build a Najila deck. I don't think it's possible for that card to ever be anything but overwhelmingly powerful.
Yeah. It's just itself being self-enabling is definitely a problem.
Yeah, I think it's another trend that we're starting to sort of see in like the stuff that we're going over, right? Is like all these commanders that are like completely self-sufficient and don't necessarily care what else you're doing. It like tend to be like more boring or just like less engaging in a casual sense, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Especially with you know, we'll talk about it more later, I think. But like with five color legends that kind of have their own, game plan, or even with like commanders specifically like Najila, who are just an engine in the command zone. You don't really need to be cognizant of what you put in the deck to support her. Like you can just you just play the best cards that you want to play, and then you're done. And she has 2-card combos that, you know, casuals play sort of Feast and Famine, right? And so incidentally, you've created a 2-card combo with your commander that ends the game.
If you played Najila as in casual as just a mono red commander, but you included Rainbow Land so that you could activate her ability, she would be one of the best mono red commanders around.
Yeah, I mean, she's still good. Even if she's played as mono red, she's still good.
Yeah, that's the power of her effect and all the things that are stapled on that card. And so we're going to move into Kenrith, talking about Kenrith right now, and Golos as well. But just one last thing I want to talk about Najila and this kind of card design is that I worry this is going to be a trend that WotC is trying to complete or carry over in terms of this cycle. So the 5-color ability on a single color commander is something they're clearly, you know, very happy with and wanting to keep repeating. So they started with Tazri. We've got Najila, Kenrith, Golos, you know, and this seems to be the trend for 5-color commanders going forward. And Sisay, the new Sisay, and this is what I want to talk about with Najila, is that I wonder if they're going to have a cycle where we go, you know, 2 generic, 1, you know, red, white, 5-color ability. I'm scared for what the green, the blue, and the black is going to look like. Oh. The black's going to be scary, man.
WotC, I know we're blowing you up, but give me that green one now, please.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so getting on to Kenrith. Morgan, you have a lot to say here, I know.
Yeah, so, I mean, if we look at Kenrith, it's got 5 abilities, and when I first saw the card, the way I described it was, this looks like someone was told to make 5 ability, like they got a half-hour, they never played Magic, got a half-hour section on the color pie, and then were tasked to make 5 abilities for the card in increasing order of cost. Like, they're all so quintessentially what the color does, and then just putting them all together makes the card obscenely powerful. Like, we haven't seen it necessarily have a huge impact at the competitive end of the spectrum, but I think that's just because Thrasios and Tymna, Thrasios does the best ability on Kenrith better.
Yeah.
And Tymna and Thrasios are just so much cheaper and easier to play. But I think if we didn't have Thrasios and Tymna, like Kenrith would obviously have been extremely unhealthy in the meta. And it's just that we have something that's like so much worse.
Right. And that's the quality of Thrasios and Tymna, not Kenrith. Like Kenrith isn't bad. He's just the second best at the thing that he does.
Transpose Kenrith back in time before Thrasios and Tymna were printed, and it is sitting right at the top of the format.
Remember when people used to play Boonweaver in Carador?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
I didn't start playing till Kaladesh Block. I don't remember anything good. Protean Hulk was unbanned right after I started playing.
I mean, I wasn't playing.
It's your fault then.
I wasn't playing competitive decks at the time, but just like imagine a world where Carador was a thing. Like Carador was the best option for like one of the competitively viable archetypes.
Yeah.
And then it's like, here you go. Have something that gives you 2 more colors, also lets you pull stuff out of the graveyard arguably more efficiently, draws cards, gives haste, like what?
Yeah. Kenrith does kind of feel like, kind of touching on what you said moments ago, Kenrith does kind of feel like it was a card created by machine learning. They fed it every ability on cards in each one of those colors, and we're like, okay, make something that's as good as all of these.
Yeah.
Kenrith by IBM Watson.
So I think that's a pretty good point to leave on in terms of competitive exclusively. Now let's get onto the more casual focused, and we'll so this previous section was more competitive focused touching on casual. Now we're going to be more casual focused touching on competitive. So one trend what we've done is we've compiled a list of cards that we think are boring design, and then cards where WotC did it right, and there's a bunch of stuff that we've left off that we just thought was like, a card that's a legendary creature, but clearly not designed for commander. And then also some things that are just, they straddle the line. They're kind of boring and fine, but they're neither egregious or interesting.
Don't forget, we are the ultimate arbiters of all this, so our word is law.
Sure. Yeah.
Also, let it be known to the listener, you listening to this right now, this was far too labor intensive, and we spent way too much time doing this, so it better be worth something.
Yeah, so one trend we noticed, so we looked back at over all the commanders printed in 2019. One trend that really stood out to us, and we kind of noticed this trend for 2019 and kind of applied it backwards in time, and we noticed it to be kind of true. And that's the fact that the front of the box commanders are major culprits for poor, boring design, along the lines of Hullen/Trulane and Corvold, etc., etc. But the secondary and tertiary commanders inside the commander product are actually kind of interesting. So this kind of leads us to have a working theory that the front of the box commanders are pushed and designed this way intentionally because these kinds of commanders are immensely popular. Like, just simply look at EDH Rec, go and look at the, if we were to, I'm just going to go on EDH Rec right now, look up the top commanders of recently. We've got Corvold. Oh, sorry, this is the past week. Corvold, Golos, Alayla, Muldrotha, Kenrith, Yarok. Okay? I'm going to tell you something, a little spoiler. 5 of those made our list for commanders that are very boring and uninspired.
And I mean, if Muldrotha was released this year, she would probably also make the list.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So it's, and if you look for the past 2 years, you see cards like Marin, Kess, just very, very basic kind of designs like that are uninteresting showing up because they are the front center of the cards on the of the commander product, and I guess that just must appeal to people. just picking generically strong commanders.
Well, I mean, it makes
Kess wasn't the front of the box.
yes,
but-
that too. It was
you're right. It
Anala.
was a Nala.
It was a Nala.
I mean, Eminence had a lot of issues
Eminence
too.
has other issues.
Let's not.
Yeah, to be
I mean,
fair,
Nala
there are
is
bigger
more
things
interesting than Kess. Wow, I can't believe I forgot Kess was not the front. Yeah, that's right.
Nala
Yeah,
is
but-
definitely more interesting than Kess.
But I think if you look at the Eminence commanders as a whole, they're not.
not
And
not the pinnacle of game design.
And Nala's one that like has, is fringe viable and competitive, which is nice because it's different from other competitive decks. But I don't think people are having a lot of fun playing against that in casual.
What about a Robo Cat Stacks? That's a big. Obviously,
just
that's a format
Didn't
leader.
Robo get
More
banned in
cats
1v1 or
with
something?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it did. So did
So
Edgar
did
Yeah.
Markov,
Markov.
yeah, the
Yeah.
two of the 4 Eminence commanders.
And with that, we'd like to move to our third topic for this podcast: 1v1 Commander and why Eminence is bad for it.
Why we should bring it back. Yeah.
But like on the subject of front of the box commanders, I think one of the big things that they've been doing wrong, and I'll just pull out one of the ones that's on our list and use it as an example to illustrate this, as Cadena, the Slinking Sorcerer. One of the things that they're doing wrong is that they are rewarding you for doing sort of the obvious thing that your deck is doing, rather than building things that play nicely with the way that leads you to play. So it's like, okay, I want to build a morph deck. Well, what does that mean? That means I'm playing. First of all, Cadena could have done something with 2/2s, or colorless creatures, or something like that, to be a little bit more, open-ended. Or you could have it somehow play nice with the idea of, using morph abilities at strange times. So maybe it somehow rewards you for not casting spells on a turn, or it rewards you for, having mana open for whatever reason, rather than sort of like, I'm rewarding you for doing the morph thing by making you draw cards. It's I'm rewarding you for, playing the way the deck wants to play.
Or it could have done like an Ixodron thing, right? Like instead of just like flipping everything face down, but like it like plays around with like flipping your stuff face up and face
you can
down,
flip
right?
stuff
Like
down,
Yeah.
like whenever you
cool.
unmorph something, morph somebody else's thing, or like just stuff like that, right?
Like, here's a way I just thought of. She makes your first morph free. Maybe you get some benefit, even if the benefit, if you want it to still be drawing cards. What if you drew cards for not having any untapped or not having any tapped lands in your end step?
What if you drew cards for morphing something on someone else's turn?
Yeah, sure. Like all sorts of ways of doing it, rather than just like, you should put morph cards in this deck, and it doesn't really matter how good the morph cards are on their own, because they still just replace themselves.
Yeah, and they all like, I think another way that I would put it, just because obviously I have to rephrase everything in my words to make it valuable to me. But like I think like a way that like I would think about it is like they're rewarding you for doing the bare minimum with a strategy, right? Like it's just like do the absolute like lowest common denominator of this strategy, and like you get to draw a card for it, and like that's all they're doing, right?
My last 2 brain cells trying to make a morph deck. Yeah, just stick all the cards with morph in and call it a day. But yeah, so I think that's a really strong point. And so we can talk about some of the other commanders that we have on this list, but if we're being honest, they really follow that kind of basic trend where they reward very basic aspects of the game. Now, it would be really cool to see something like whereas instead of a generic effect, so let's use Yarok for an example. Yarok, not the best competitive deck. I know people have worked on some Alurin builds, and there's some spice going on there. But in terms of casual, dude, I've heard nothing but bad stories about
horror
Yarok.
stories.
I mean, like I went down to my LGS, and it was Commander Day, and the owner knows that I pretty much only play CEDH, but he's like, come down, someone will let you borrow a deck. So I show up and I borrow a deck, and it's like a not very tuned Brea Artifacts deck, and then the guy whips out Yarok, and I'm like, oh, okay, this will be miserable. And it turns out, by the way, it was really terrible. We're evoking mole drifters left and right, and like flipping e-witnesses and getting cards back, and just it was an obnoxious experience. And there was a lock on the table by like turn 7 in a supposedly very casual match, and the guy was like, I just threw it together today out of my junk bin.
I mean, like that's the thing. The thing with Yarok is I could believe that, and it'd still be a very strong deck.
Exactly.
You can put Eternal Witness in Yarok? Man, that never really occurred to me. I didn't.
Yeah.
Let's go on. Skyfall enters the battlefield. Cool. Let's build this deck.
The first 60 cards that come up. Yeah, great.
No, you have to skip. You have to skip Bane of Progress because that happening twice. But
right.
Yeah. So there's something that you could just modify with that ability, right? You could just double the ETBs of cards with even power. Or I mean, that's probably a terrible design choice, and but that's the first thing that came across my head. Just restrict it in some way that's interesting and requires thought and consideration.
Restrictions breed,
or just give me a wild pair on a stick,
or maybe not. But like restrictions breed creativity, right? Like just give it. It's just like giving these like just generally. They don't even have to be strong, but like just generally meh, or just like. Generally like very easy to trigger abilities that like just reward you in very basic ways. It's not compelling. It doesn't make you want to build a deck around it, or if it does, you're not building a unique deck around it, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I think like even if we look at Yarok, what was the two big ETB commanders before him were
Rune.
there was Brago, who wasn't super fun, but also that wasn't so much ETBs because you were doing like artifact and enchantment shenanigans.
Yeah, and flicker stuff.
Like it wasn't
outside of that
creature ETBs. But yeah, like Rune was the creature ETB deck, and like that's one where that ability has other uses. You could like, I'll flicker out something big and then wipe the board, or I can just keep this up to try and dodge removal.
Mm-hmm.
It encouraged you to play ETBs or creatures with good ETB triggers, but it didn't like say exile another target creature with an enter the battlefield trigger and return. Like
it was also gated in terms of it had a mana cost and could only do one thing per turn. Yeah. Right? Imagine if Rune had been a what's the Eerie Interlude?
Oh my god.
Or Ghost Away.
Oh yeah, just flicker everything.
Nope.
Yeah, like imagine. That's when they have these kind of, when you just print Panharmonicon on a stick, you're just asking for trouble. And another thing to kind of talk about Yarok, and this is something I know people complain about with Gitrog, and I think it's just kind of egregious as well. It's just, why does it have like decent stats and keywords?
Oh gosh, I have the same question with Hullen every time.
Are we even getting into keywords here? Is this what we're doing? Because
are we calling Hullen decent stats and keywords?
I mean, he's a 2/4 with vigilance outside of his abilities.
5 mana though.
But it blocks and kills Timna.
Hey, that's Timna's fault, not Hullen's.
Okay, I'm just saying,
dude. Card.
Well, no, I don't think it compares at even reasonably to something like Yarok,
sure.
who has an extra
with
point
Death
power,
Touch and Lifelink in it to 3/5. No,
cards like Yarok should be 2/2s as like a max. Change my mind.
Gitrog is a 6/6 for some reason.
Yeah, Gitrog is a 6/6 with Death Touch. Yeah. I mean, that's along the lines of like, I mean, if we're talking about non-legendaries, we could even say that like Okame Adversary feels a little bonkers that way. 1 and a green for a 2/3 with Death Touch that draws a card when it does combat damage.
Allegedly, it costs more than
allegedly.
I've never seen it happen. I can't verify.
Apparently, it's cast for 4 mana occasionally, but I've never seen that happen.
Yeah, so we can list some of the other cards in our boring designs that you guys can yell at us because your commander was mentioned.
I mean,
we've got.
I think like the obvious counterpart to Yarok is just Teysa, right? Like same thing.
Yeah,
like
true.
it just encourages you to do the thing that like Orzhov Aristocrats is already a very established thing and with more interesting commanders, and this is just like, oh, why don't you do the same thing with a more powerful, less interesting commander?
What if things died and then came back?
I think you might be onto something here, actually.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, so we can start listing things, and maybe someone just chime in with their one quick anecdote for why it's boring. Anji,
you are incentivized to play madness cards, and you really don't have to care about what they are, and it doesn't enable any other real shenanigans, like other than just being a generic rummager.
Like it's the same.
There's no creative.
It's the same thing as like Cadena, right? Like it's not rewarding you for doing things with madness cards. It's just rewarding you for having them in your deck.
Right.
Elsha.
Elsha's fine. She's really powerful, but
it's
rewards
a very
you for
powerful
playing
effect,
spells.
But it's very generic. Yeah.
Like
it's cool, but it's generic.
Yeah. Crick.
I think it's like interesting, but I think the way that it plays out is just like very like you just want to gain life, right? Like you're just putting all the life gain that you can into this deck and then trying to do stupid things with cost reduction.
It's like committing suicide, but like in a very reserved way.
Golos. This is everyone's favorite card to hit on, and like I've played Golos decks myself for casual, and I've always imposed like my own deck building restriction, which is not to be able to activate Golos' ability. And guess what? Card is still busted.
Yeah, like even recasting Golos to tutor lands out of your deck for powerful effects is like it's just it gets kind of stupid. Like exactly.
Casting him just finds a busted land, and then he's a generic value engine in the long run. And
if you
so you can put whatever you want in the deck.
Yeah, if you build a turbo Golos deck, it is like it's hard to distinguish between Golos and Narset.
If you World Gorger Golos, you're a bad person. That's all I have to say.
You don't even need to do like World Gorger Golos combos or anything like that. But just in a casual setting, you cast Golos and then you ramps you up for 1 mana, and then you play your land drop the following turn. You've got enough to activate him. You activate him. Oh, guess what? I've hit 2 turn spells and a bunch of land untappers, and etc., etc., etc. And it's just Narset.
Here's a Seedborn Muse, so I can untap more.
Oh, yes, I would like a Zendikar Resurgence. We'll put that one into play.
Yeah, Golos is absolutely egregious, and I'm just sad because I would have loved to have a commander that had his ETB without the needless extra stuff that just makes it
and just not have them in 5 color and like
the ETB is really cool, but let's make that like Selesnya or mono green and then move on with our lives. Oh god,
please, yes. Okay, so next up we've got Kikar.
Kikar just too directly turns non-creature spells into extra mana. They could have designed it in such a way that you get the spirits, and like maybe it has sacrifice 5 spirits and do something different. But here it basically reads, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, add red to your mana pool. And that's like... And there's like... I mean, you can Skull Clamp, and I guess you can do Divergent stuff, but like...
Like, I've played against Kikar in a casual setting.
Same,
and it turns out, like, Anointed Procession is a pretty good card.
Anointed Procession, Shared Animosity.
Yeah. It turns out they're pretty good cards.
It plays a lot like Locust God that can do extra shit.
Yeah, and like the Skull Clamp shenanigans when you have a token doubler out it's just obnoxious. It's one of those casual decks that is like very good accidentally. It's boring.
Yeah. Moraphon.
So this is sort of the casual counterpart to like the 5-color good stuff decks in my eyes, right? Where it's like Kenrith doesn't really see play in casual because like it's boring and like it doesn't really encourage you to do anything. So a lot of people just don't do it, right? At least in my eyes, from what I've seen.
Yeah.
Moraphon is like in the other direction where like nobody in competitive plays it because you would never play like pretty much any tribal deck. But like in casual, it's just
man.
like this. It's just like, yeah, just have the best commander for your tribal deck. just this is the best one. Just play this. Why do you need like to be color restricted? Just play your like, oh, you want to play knights? That's cool. You know, you could play this really cool like 3-color knight commander, or you could just play 5 colors.
Morophon is I think Morophon is a changeling because they just didn't want to print another Sliver Legend in the set. Like honestly,
they wanted to print 2, but they just couldn't.
Be honest.
Okay, Omnath, and that is Locust of the Royal.
So, I mean, like, okay, to be fair, Omnaths, like, historically have not been great for casual. Angry Omnath is not particularly fun to play against. Regular Omnath is more fun, still not particularly fun to play against. This one's even less fun.
I'm not sure if I've ever actually said this on the podcast, but in casual, Angry Omnath, I think, is comfortably my least favorite commander to play against. Yeah, or just have be involved.
Well, because your only axis of interaction is like MLD at that point, right? And then
that's frowned upon. You can't do that.
And then you can't do that. You can't do that in casual. I remember like early games where I was the Omnath kid at the table, and finally someone Armageddoned me, and I was like, okay, no more Omnath.
I get it.
I'm gonna do something else now. Sorry about that, bud.
And then basically they printed a wet Angry Omnath, and then it just does it even worse.
It's
like
just
it draws cards too. Like I don't,
yeah. It's also the single best food chain outlet ever printed. But let's.
If only it was in.
If only we got some black tutors.
Wow.
Yeah.
Come on, WotC. Ignore all the shit we've been giving you and break these 5-color commanders. Vanifar. Morgan, this one's on you.
I mean, like, it's just, you know, Birthing Pod is a well-established archetype that has historically done a lot of things in, you know, many different environments, and then now you've just made it way easier to untap it and just chain through stuff, and the deck is just, it's very predictable of, like, if you let them activate their commander, they're just gonna win, and you just kind of have to deal with that.
And they're still printing cards for it. Like, stop.
Yeah, and this is the same issue that Pod had in Modern, which was every new card they printed had, like, if it was good and somehow fit the deck just got stronger and stronger. And like, it was such a generic engine that so many of the cards that they printed fit it.
Yeah.
Like, since Vanifar was printed, we've had a 2-mana untapper in Corridor Monitor. We've had a 3-mana untapper that's green, which is good for Woodland Bellower in Hyrax Tower Scout.
Yeah.
We got Crashing Drawbridge to give haste. Like, it's just, and like, even if you were trying to do more casual stuff, like, now you can just chain up to Nyxbloom Ancient and just have like 1 billion mana, and then
even if you're doing more casual stuff and you're building from like more recent standard sets, Vanifar is still busted, right? I mean, you got Bounding Krasis, Hyrax Tower Scout, Corridor Monitor, like,
and also it's only a matter of time before they print like more untappers at 4 and 5, which you're like currently somewhat choked on at the very least. And that's
dude,
like once those
chain
are
up to
consistent.
Craterhoof. Like,
I mean, you don't get the creatures in play like you do.
I mean, over the course of just the game, in terms of you know, casting creature, value chaining
just, like,
up the way.
This concept of like this commander just inevitably gets you to a Craterhoof eventually. It's like not a fun concept.
No, now you chain into up into Nyxbloom Ancient and then Finale of Devastation.
Or if we're looking at the high synergy cards, we have Breaching Hippocamp, Bounding Krasis, Protean Hulk, Pestermite, Deceiver Exarch, Fate Stitcher, Great Oak Guardian, Scrib Ranger. Like, it's just, a whole bunch of ways of untapping Vanifar. Yeah. Who would have thought people would do this more than once?
And the last on our list of boring, uninspired design is Urza. Wow, who would have thought? When you print a commander that just does everything.
Just does Tolarian Academy and also makes a large body.
Hey, did you know that they're all Mock Sapphires,
makes an even larger man.
Yeah.
I mean,
And, like,
okay,
honestly-
calling it uninspired design is maybe a bit of a reach here because it is kind of Vorthosy. Like it does kind of fit the lore and the
Yeah.
idea of Urza. So I get that in terms of design. And, you know, they are going to print powerful commanders every now and then and powerful cards, and that's fine. But it would have been nice to rein it in maybe just a bit. You know,
Yeah, I mean, if we could avoid Winter Orb as mana rock in the future, that wouldn't be too bad for
You know,
me.
Yeah, and honestly, like,
Collector Oof exists, Null Rod exists, so maybe have it grant the ability to the artifacts instead of having it be his ability. Like,
Yeah.
also
maybe
like,
don't give him that infinite mana outlet ability. Like I don't know.
the possibility of tapping, or like the idea behind like tapping the artifacts that only work when they're untapped, like also would have been kind of interesting if, first of all, if you weren't getting mana for it, because then it's just
Yeah, if you weren't like getting upside,
and also like specifically the two cards that it works best with also just happen to be like really unfun.
yeah,
And also like extra, you know, like Howling Mine is like, oh, that's like a neat little synergy. You get to draw and nobody else does. Like, cool. It's like, oh, Winter Orb, so you get to untap lands. Nobody else does. All right. Wow, that's cool, and also not obvious, and also not in every deck at all.
and also
Yeah.
not fun.
I'm having fun.
Like,
Definitely not fun. It's bad for casual because it definitely encourages people to run orbs and that kind of thing. You pretty much have to, like, that's just what it says on the card. And it's bad for
Scotty, do you feel like you're forced to run orbs? there are
Yeah,
help
oh
groups
yeah.
for this, Scotty. We can help. You just have to
well,
speak up.
I mean,
Well,
Okay.
So like if you look at Winter Orb on EDHREC, Urza is actually not the top commander. The top commander is Hikori Dusk Drinker.
yeah, that'll do.
Dust Drinker. But it goes,
Sure.
Hikori and Urza are both at like 65% of those decks are running Winter Orb. And then like the next thing after that is 45.
yeah.
It's like Derevi or
It's
something.
It
Hydar.
goes Hydar, Rime Wind Master, but there's only 31 decks, so that's just like a sample size thing. Then it's like stacks decks. It's like Thalia, Teferi, Grand Arbiter, Derevi.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've shit on WotC enough. Let's give them some, kudos. And this one we're not going to talk about each. We're not going to talk about each of these commanders. We're just going to list some of the ones that we thought were actually WotC got it right. So Atla, Chainer, Pramicon. You guys can carry on through this
Sure.
list.
Yeah,
Go.
Ryami was pretty neat. Like Greven, Ayula, Atemsis was like pretty awesome.
Scotty, do you wanna take a couple?
Yeah. Emery, I thought was very cool. Rip Paradox Engine. Feather is so my take on Feather is that the decks that get built around it are cool. I don't like Feather all that much, but it did give Boros like a voice, which was cool.
It gave Boros a voice, and my favorite thing about Feather was that it took a pile of basically unplayable cards, and without changing anything too drastically, all of a sudden made them amazing in
Playables.
Feather.
Yeah.
And playables. And it wasn't just the cantripping cards. You get all your toolbox cards and things that just wouldn't normally scale in Commander, and all of a sudden they are. And now you've got a cool, interesting way to get card advantage in Boros. So I thought Feather, pretty cool what they did, although it does fall into that category of kind of auto builds itself.
I think there's like elements of the deck that are auto build, like, wow, you're running like Shelter and God's Willing, and like the actual instance that you play to work with Feather are auto build. But there's a few different ways you can sort of get the payoff for those instances that I think is like what makes the deck kind of interesting. Like you've got your like whenever you cast a spell, make token stuff. You've got
Burn.
You can lean into Burn. You can lean
Your
into
Young Pyromancer,
Heroic.
your Firebrand Archer type cards.
Yeah, you got
pingers.
your pingers. You can do sort of a more Voltron-y thing because you're just running a bunch of spells that protect
That
Feather from
pump
being removed.
and protect. Yeah, you get kind of that Shu Yun type angle.
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
your cards, you can recycle them and just keep going and going and going. Pretty
But
cool.
I mean, the fact that the top 5 or 10 cards in Feather are in like 90% of Feather decks is not great.
Next
You got
up.
Hogak.
Hogak's a great one.
The Gak is
Hogak is
back.
one- yeah.
Hogak's so cool. Like
It's so cool in Commander, and it's just so awful for everything else.
the card is so cool. Like, Hogak is so cool that people forget the last line of Hogak, which says trample. It's an 8/8 with trample, and that's overshadowed by all the other abilities, like the Convoke and the Delve to cast. And you may cast this from the graveyard.
And
like it's
you can't
such a cool
spend
card.
mana to cast Hogak.
You can't spend mana to cast Hogak. You have to Convoke and Delve Hogak out. It's the coolest thing. It's so neat.
Next up is one of my favorite cards that they made, and that's Kethis. Dude.
Can
Sir?
Just express how grateful I am that Kethis isn't blue.
Oh,
goodness.
God, yeah.
Just makes everything so much better.
Yeah, no, Kethis is super sweet. It's not, I mean, when you open the possibilities in terms of all legendary cards, you worry that having such an open possibility makes it too auto build or too generic. But I think it falls in the sweet spot of wide enough so that you can build it, the way you want. Oh, I want to build planeswalkers or legendary creatures, or just turbo mill and play some lands and other value stuff.
Yep.
While also, yeah, so you can assert your own independence without, having it be too broad.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got Marisi, 5-color Niv, who was briefly a competitive commander.
Rip Niv.
And then we've also got, we've got Rien, Sir Kara, and Volrath. And that wraps up our
Rip
list.
Niv, but also long live Niv, right? Like,
Yeah. I think Niv falls into the same category as Kethis, kind of, where it's very broad, just 2-color cards in my hand, card advantage. That's pretty broad, but it allows you to really lean into how you want in terms of, customizing the 2-color pairings and abusing the ETB in all different ways.
It's definitely an interesting one because we were sort of complaining about like things that just reward you for having the cards in your deck, and Niv does that. But the cards that it rewards you for having are so broad that like you still typically are picking some other theme as well that is unique, or like if not unique, is different than the direction the next person to build the deck takes.
It's less that it's like forcing you to like, okay, here are these like 80 cards that have this keyword, and now I just have to pick however many of them, and it's more like encouraging you to build decks in a way where like you're shirking certain staples in order to fit more of these synergy cards in, and it's encouraging you to make your deck more unique.
right. I mean, you can absolutely run Dovin's Veto, Assassin's Trophy, Abrupt Decay, all those good multicolored interaction spells. But you could also run Depala, Pilot Exemplar, if you wanted to, and make some kind of very weird Bears in Cars type deck. Like, it's so open. That design space is so open. I think it's really cool, especially for casual players. I don't think it's dead in casual as much as it is in CDH, but
Yeah. So Reed, you've got, so now that we're wrapping up our little list segment, we're just gonna put a little bow on this this whole segment before we move on to gut check and listener questions. And Reed, you wrote these part of the show notes.
Yeah, so I just sort of wanted to like
here.
wrap up because we sort of went through like CDH focused and then like casual focused stuff and like looking at the card design choices, and I sort of really wanted to like directly compare like what the differences are in what like healthy commander design looks like between like CDH and EDH, and then like potentially also looking at some similarities as well, right? Because there are definite differences, and it's definite like there are different things that make commander designs healthy in CDH versus regular EDH. Just reiterating what we've already said.
Sure.
something that I really wanted to get across here, or that I wanted to express as an opinion, was I think there's a real difference in how gimmick commanders, like how healthy gimmick commanders are in CDH versus regular EDH. So like gimmick commanders being like, let's say stuff like, I think like Gitrog's a bit gimmicky, but just
Any of the face commanders.
yeah, any of the face stuff. Yeah, really like anything that rewards you for doing like something very specific and like very
Muldrotha.
specific. Plus Muldrotha is pretty, yeah. I'm talking more like yeah, like Anye is a big one. Anje.
Or
Anje.
Kesher.
Tashar,
maybe?
sure, something like that. Kethis, even though he's not really like a CDH commander, I think that's more like power level reasons and specific wording rather than what he's encouraging. But just like stuff like that, right? Like things that encourage you to do very specific things and build your deck in very specific ways. I think those are actually incredibly healthy for CDH specifically, because they encourage you to build your deck in a way that isn't just good stuff, and they encourage you to, again, leave out certain staples or reconsider certain staples in your deck and like play cards that you wouldn't play in any other deck, play win cons that you wouldn't play in other places because they might be more efficient in some reason, in some ways. And they just increase the diversity of what decks look like, rather than just having like blue-black storm for this commander and then blue-black storm for this commander and then blue-black storm for this commander, right?
One thing I think that we've said before on the podcast is that it would be nice if the generically good win cons that are commander agnostic were under the power level of the commander specific ones.
Definitely.
And that's just that's where things would be ideally, you know, according to us anyway. Because you really get that trade-off of getting more focused builds versus, you know, just generic power good stuff with a generic win con.
And I think sort of an interesting, like the reason why gimmick commanders increase diversity in competitive but kind of decrease it in casual is because casual doesn't really have a metagame. So what people default to looking at when they look at creativity is, how does your build of this deck compare to the next person's build of this deck? And that's where the gimmick commanders kind of fall flat, because it's like, oh, I'm playing Anji, Anya, whatever. I'm just going to jam madness cards in here, and like, there really aren't that many of those, so I'm running most of them, and the next person's running most of them, and the next person's running most of them. Whereas in CDH, because there is meta, things like, even if everyone's playing the same weird fringe gimmick deck, like at least it's not the meta.
That sort of gave me a good idea of how to express this, where like it's really like in casual, it's really more about like how your deck for this commander compares to everybody else's deck for this commander, and you want to be the most unique on that front as possible, right? Like you want your build of this commander to look like as much different from the next person's build as possible, right? And that's like just in general,
you're expressing
right?
yourself through
Whereas
your deck.
in CDH, it's a lot more about how specific commanders' decks look compared to each other. Where you want this the deck that this commander helms over everybody that's playing it to look different from the deck that this commander helms, right?
Yep.
Yeah, sounds good. And then so the next point you have on here, so we were talking about differences there, and then now you have some similarities in healthy commander design between CDH and regular EDH.
Which, I mean, these are the pretty basic ones, but just to sort of nail it down a bit, I think one of the big similarities is just having commanders that encourage unique things, encouraging you to do something that isn't just putting staples into a deck, right? Just doing like commanders that encourage you to do things that other commanders can't replicate is I think healthy across the board. And then also, even aside from that, I think it's really awesome and really great and really healthy when specific commanders make you want to use cards that are not used almost anywhere else, or historically have not been used. I think like Feather is a great example of this one, right? Where Feather does this really well, where it's the like Feather existing opens up this whole set of cards that have historically just like never been playable in the format, right? Like what deck plays like Shelter outside of Feather, right? Like you like outside of that deck, you're not playing any of these pump spells, but because this commander exists, you have this whole breadth of things that you want to be playing with and you want to look at. And I think that's really important and really healthy when commanders like that get printed.
Yeah, I'd love to see like maybe a vanilla creatures matter kind of commander,
sure, yeah.
You know, something that if it doesn't have any text on it, you know, you get some benefit from that, or something cool happens. You know, Goreclaw is one of my casual decks that I play. You know, thank you to Matt for introducing me to it. But it's cool because you're not just playing. I mean, a lot of the time you are playing some really just standard good green cards, but you're also leveraging some cards just for their stats, right? Like all of a sudden you're Multani, and like original Multani becomes insane in Goreclaw because you're paying 4 mana for something that has, you know, sometimes 20 worth of stats. And that's, you know, maybe a really tough example, but I also use like Hunted Troll. How many green decks are going to run Hunted Troll generally? Almost none. But when I'm paying 2 mana for 8 power and 8 power, 4 toughness, and has regenerate, you know what? That's pretty sick. Yeah, I like that. That's a good sentiment to leave on. So,
not to forget Mercy Beyond.
yeah. Playing a 0 mana 5/6, hell yeah. You know, if any of you are Goreclaw pilots and, you know, casual, or if you play the meme Goreclaw Storm deck on the deck list database under the I don't know, meme section if they still have it, then you know what, message me and I'll let you into the Goreclaw server. It's very on. Exclusive. Yeah, so next up we are doing everyone's favorite segment, Gut Check.
Gut Check.
Gut Check.
This week's Gut Check is brought to us by Scotty.
Hey everyone.
So Scotty, what's the Gut Check for this week?
All right, this week's Gut Check is as follows. It's been said that EDH is a chips and beer format where you get together with your friends to have fun. What food and beverage is evocative of a CEDH game?
Oh, God.
I feel like I have to say Oreos.
All right.
shout out to friend of the show, Dave.
All right.
And his always bringing cookies.
Okay. So I've got my answer. Does everyone have theirs?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, so I feel like mine might be a bit of a cop-out in terms of food, because my answer is no food. Get your food away from my expensive cards. But increase up my sleeves, no thanks. But drinks, I think beer and CDH goes along, you know, superbly. Or, you know, maybe you can also do shots.
Oh, damn it,
every
you got
time
me.
you take a misplay, take a shot.
My answer for this was going to be, if we're going to continue with the metaphor that beer meets us sets for EDH, it's really just like vodka and salt for CEDH.
By the way, shout out to the CEDH cast. I know they compete against you guys, but they developed a CEDH drinking game. And it sounds like it would kill every human at the table. So that's kind of what spurred this question, and I'm sorry.
No, you're allowed to mention the CDH cast. We gave them the shout out, but of course, because they're our number one competitors. Yeah, never again.
Yes.
Never mention them in front of me ever again. Or
Lyndon, that's a lie. We don't have any competitors. Jesus Christ.
Oh,
take that, Brayden and Ian. Okay, so that's good for gut check. Look forward to seeing the answers
we didn't get Scotty's answer.
Oh,
my
true. I'm sorry. I'm so used to me being the person who is the final one.
My goodness.
Okay, Scotty,
I get to answer.
Yeah.
For me, it's just because this is the way that I feel. It's always like for playing CEDH. If I drink beer when I play CEDH, I make a lot of mistakes. So for me, it's like sparkling water and vegetables. Honestly,
you took it the other direction. I respect it.
Dr. Pepper is great. It's my favorite beverage, but you know what is also really good? Water. It comes out of the ground.
No, what you need is like a good like hangover drink. Like a red eye, or you get like
a Caesar.
Not a Caesar at all. Not a Caesar at all.
No, vetoed.
None of your fish tomato goo,
hey,
please.
You take that back.
And then also just like some smelling salts.
Okay. So
whoa!
I'm glad that even though
Vicks vapor rub.
I'm glad that even though Matt's not here, we still maintain the appropriate ratio of at least half of the podcast correctly knowing that Caesars are vile.
Caesars are great. Shut up.
They're not.
Okay. So before we close out the show, we're going to be doing some listener questions. We figured we'd get some of the, our listeners like to leave some meme listener questions for us, some jokes. So we figured, you know what? Let's acknowledge them and get these out of the way.
Shit all over them. No, never mind.
So iCut asks, what if Thassa's Oracle was printed as an enchantment creature?
That would be very bad.
Then Zer would be a competitive deck again. Yay!
Yeah, having it just be strictly better in terms of being able to search it up with Zer and find it with Enlightened Tutor.
From that.
Just having a panic attack in the background when being faced with the fact that that's not Zer is no longer a competitive deck was just the best part of that question.
Yeah, so I think that's your answer is it would be bad because it would be bad for the format because it would be just even better than it already is.
But you could counter it with Swan Song.
But you could tutor for it with Enlightened Tutor.
Genuinely though, I might start playing Annul.
You might what?
Start playing Annul.
Oh yeah.
Oh, Annul.
Oh yeah.
Okay. ASO, aka Aaron, asks, if one were to stage a coup on the EDHRC, how would one go about that? Step-by-step plan, please.
Okay, first, you want to get a hold of a firearms vendor.
Knock, knock, knock.
Second,
FBI,
you need to get... Second, you need to get fake passports that don't identify you.
You missed the part where you need financing first. So yeah,
that's true. That's true. You need a rich benefactor.
Or you get into selling opiates and then raise money that way.
Oh,
that's true. But maybe we could just ask. Maybe we could just ask Rudy for some money, though.
You just take a loan from
the
Rudy.
first step is to become an EDH content creator, indoctrinate yourself with the playgroup, get onto the CAG, and then usurp a position in the CDHRC and change it from within.
Or
that's the real answer.
Contract a paramilitary organization and storm.
I think that's the proper angle.
Wait, no, become president of the United States and exert your authority.
What you're going to need to do is start making very good crystal meth, and then get deeply enveloped in a drug cartel to the point where you're allowed to hire their services.
Okay,
I think that's it.
I think all we've succeeded in doing is proving that we are in no way qualified to replace the RC.
Hey, that's fair. I'm willing to accept that as the lesson from that segment.
Yeah. Deco asks, if every black-green X deck that runs Bob Oh, sorry. I guess I should rephrase this. Should every black-green X deck that runs Bob also run Grob, which is Okame Adversary for those who you don't
And
know?
Bob is Dark Confidant, in case you don't know.
Only if you have Timna? Actually, that's not true. No.
That's not true.
Yeah, pretty much everything, yeah.
Lyndon, do you run it? Do you run it in Gitrog?
It's in the flex slots. It's like it really just depends if I want a second version, like another copy of that effect.
I guess if you were like low enough to the ground, maybe not.
Sorry, say that again?
I was just saying, like, maybe if you were low enough to the ground, like you were trying to turbo Nas and you didn't have Timna, and like this isn't a real deck, but like you could construct a deck that met parameters where you would say no. But
actually, I think
pretty much all the decks that are playable.
We're not playing it in Curious Control right now because there are only so many slots for card advantage engines, and you sort of want something that potentially draws more than one card a turn cycle.
Well, I think the X is like.
Are you playing
tenuously?
Speaking of Curious Control, Timmy T1000 asks, who do I need to petition to get Sig River Cutthroat removed from 4-color Curious Control? It's underperformed in every game I've had it. It seems good on paper, but horrible in practice.
Have you considered getting better?
That would be me. Let's cash me outside when you come to Toronto, and we'll settle this like men. Yeah, no, Sig River Cutthroat's just great. I don't know what you're talking about. I refuse. You could have everybody in the CDH community sign a petition to cut Sig River Cutthroat, but you can't take it away from me.
Well, hold on. We can. I believe we can rule 0 your rights.
Right, yes.
I believe this was referred to earlier. We can rule 0 your rights, and you can't fight us.
That famous rule 0ing away my human rights.
Okay. Cobblepot asks, and it's our last listener question. Assume a pod of 3 Sushi Hulks and 1 meme deck with no non-beats win cons. When is it correct to commit resources to disrupting the win conless player?
I would say
I would say immediately,
so that they learn their lesson and then stop playing their no non-beats win con meme deck.
They're just beat them summarily and swiftly. Like, just get it done, and then you're fine.
Well, I think the real answer, at least for me, is that if you're no threat immediately from a combo, people are going to leave you, alone for a long, long time, and it's only going to become, pertinent to try and defeat you and take you out of the game when you start putting enough pressure, on everyone else. So if you've got a Tender Shoot Dryad,
that immediately becomes a problem.
That's going to pose. Becomes a very big problem for the Hulk players if they've arrived at some sort of like equilibrium. Everyone's checking each other and counterspell wars. Sandbagging, all that nonsense. If you slam a Tender Shoot Dryad, you best believe people should be and will be committing resources to answer that. Now, something like a slower than a Tender Shoot Dryad, it really becomes dicey, like when to do that, especially if you can't direct all of that damage at, like, if you can direct a bunch of damage at one player at a time. Like, if you imagine that there was a Sarah Ascendant in play, right?
Yes.
If you're picking on one person with the Sarah Ascendant, it doesn't really behoove anyone else who's not getting attacked, to deal with it.
Why would they commit resources right now?
I would
they don't have to.
When you present a clock that could credibly end the game. Like, if you have a 15-turn clock, someone's going to combo before then. But if you have, like, a 4-turn clock, then...
It is notable that this question was asked by Cobblepot, and the list he's referring to...
only half a game, right?
Yeah, there you go. The list he's referring to is, like, very specifically a Flash Hulk list that just flashes in either a package of Hate Bears or an Archon of Valor's Reach naming instance. So there is some context here that I guess matters. Like, you assume that the Flash isn't coming, but maybe the deck plays a deafening silence and you cast your one spell for the turn. Someone casts their one spell for the turn being flash, and then someone goes to stop it. The objective of the deck is to then flash for like a bunch of hate bears or some bomb.
If we're specifically discussing Archon of Valor's Reach, you disrupt it after you land the Grand Abolisher.
Yeah, there you go.
I like Archon of Valor's Reach in my casual
when people
deck.
When people start playing Archon of Valor's Reach, that's when we start playing Inverter of Truth in our CDH decks, right? So we can go Inverter of Truth into Oracle.
Seems so much worse than Diviner.
We leveler now.
Leveler. You can fabricate for leveler. You can even transmute the artifact for leveler. Let's go.
Okay. Well, I think that about wraps it up for this episode. If you guys would like to reach out to us with any questions, comments, or concerns, you can contact us on Twitter at Into the North Pod, via our email, intothenorthpodcast@gmail.com, or on our Discord server, the invite link for which can be found in the description for this episode. An extra special thanks to all of our patrons who help cover the expenses for our show and allow us to work towards improving the quality of the podcast. If you too would like to become a Patreon, we are at patreon.com/intothenorthpodcast. Thank you as always to the band Vox Cadre for our lovely podcast music, to Nate Slover for our equally lovely podcast logo, to our long-suffering podcast editor Roadkill, and to Scotty for being such a wonderful guest. Next episode will be out in 2 weeks. Until then, see ya.
See ya.
Auf Wiedersehen!